animates are strong in this world. They are getting smarter, and now they display their venomous taint in their own outpost builds. The battle to free this world will be long. The Wolfpack will need a strong base to aid them in this battle. But will there be enough time to get it built? Greetings everyone, Wolf here with another episode of Minecraft Java Edition, the Village and Pillage update. Here we are in episode 2, and we're now in the dungeon that we found in the first episode, the skeleton spawner. So I figured, let's really kind of knock things off and get right into digging into this spawner and getting up the mob farm XP farms and stuff like that. And this is actually gonna be a couple projects put into one using just this one spawner. All right, before we really kind of get into things, let's go over some of the spawner basics. So let's get over to our testing world. And here we are over at the testing world for the Tales of the Wolfpack. This is generated purely in a 1.14 generation and has no data or resource pack or any kind of modification whatsoever. Therefore, anything that we test here will function in our world. All right, let's get into this dungeon stuff. Here we are. This is a mock-up of a dungeon. These are special structures that generate within your worlds. And how a dungeon size, at least, is generated is based upon the generation algorithm. The largest you'll find is a 7x7x4. And what that basically means is it'll be 7 blocks one way, 7 blocks in the other direction, and 4 blocks up. The smallest you'll find is a 5x5x4, and I believe the one that we did find was actually the 5x7x4. All right, and in this, you'll discover that it's a dungeon because you'll have a cross between cobblestone and mossy cobblestone. That'll indicate that you have a dungeon if you come across, like, say, you're digging through it, and all of a sudden you come into this stuff, you're looking at a dungeon. Your spawner, the item that actually creates the mobs, will always be centered in every single dungeon we have. All right, and I just also want to note that when you get to the ceiling, you'll note that the ceiling is not cobblestone or mossy cobblestone. It's whatever naturally generates in the area that the dungeon is placed in. There actually is no ceiling to these things. Now, each dungeon will generate anywhere from 0 to 2 chests for treasure. That's based upon the treasure algorithm. And the reason why 0 chests is that there is a possibility no chest will form. I actually have come across this. And that's because either the algorithm is unable to say, okay, I can place a chest here, or something else comes in and actually removes the generated chest for whatever reason. But generally, you'll find at least 1 chest per dungeon. And I have found one instance where I found that the generation put both chests next to each other and it formed a double chest. Okay, that's how we find, locate, and identify a dungeon. How a spawner determines when to spawn a mob is based upon a sensing range from the mob spawner. When I count that identification run, it's 16 blocks out from the spawner itself. So if I come here and count out 16 blocks, that'll be the sensing range of this spawner. So what I normally do, so I can get in my designs, I usually start with the spawner as number 1. So this would be the first block, and then I count 16 blocks out, which for here is this block right here with this torch on it. That's block number 16. Okay, so here, if you look, you can actually see the particle effects giving off by the spawner. It's got its little fire thing, and you can see the thing in the middle that's spinning around doing its little dance thing. Now, if I go one more block out and put my back up against where this block is, watch what happens. The particle effects goes away, and you don't see the little spinny thing. That means that the spawner is no longer sensing our presence within range, so its generation was deactivated by the distance. Now, if I take a block and place it here, and push ourselves up against this block, watch what happens with the spawner. It activates again. So it's actually able to see us, in other words, sense us, and then for it can generate its spawns. So if you notice, we kind of stand between this block and we're still within range. That's why I count 16 out using the spawner as the first block. Because if by any chance I happen to come here and I get pushed back here, any automatic generation I want is deactivated. So I always make sure to keep myself within that 16 block radius. Now to turn off a spawner, skeletons and zombies, spiders, all still require the level 7 or less of the light to spawn. If it's 8 or above, they will not spawn, even though this device generates them outside of the regular spawning cap. So by placing a torch on all 4 sides, as long as you keep your room size the small size as I demonstrated over there, this will deactivate the spawning within the area of the spawner itself. Now, if you have a hallway or a cave or something that's outside here and it's not lit up, but it's still within the spawning range of the spawner, it will generate. So make sure that anything near it is also lit up. But this right here will deactivate the generation of the spawner itself in the initial dungeon. All right. The sensing range of the spawner is actually not a square box. Yeah, we play in a square world, but this is one of the few occasions where the sensing range actually is a spheroid. It's spherical in nature. So that's 16 blocks going out in 4 directions, 3-dimensionally. All right. So anywhere that I am inside this spheroid, that spawner will sense us, and as you can see, it's activated. All right, so if I go all the way down to the bottom here and look up, you can see that the spawner is functioning. I go all the way up here, let's get on this glass block and look down, you can see that the spawner is also functioning. So if you're walking above a dungeon, say on the overworld, and it's within the range of you walking on the grass, it'll actually generate and spawn whatever mobs that are there. Or if you're down below caving or mining or whatever, and you're underneath it and you don't realize there's a dungeon above you, it'll still generate. So that you have to keep that whole sphericalness in mind for when this spawner wants to identify where you're located. And that also works in if you want to place your AFK below it or above it. This is where your working area is located with that in mind. So, to help prove that this is not a square, let's go to this block that's just outside of the range and look at the spawner. And you can see now the spawner is deactivated. Let's go over the spawner generation now. The actual generation of the mobs is larger than the dungeon size that we find. You go 4 blocks out from the spawner, that begins your generation box. So our actual dungeon size will be 9 blocks by 9 blocks wide from the dungeon and the spawner being centered. So if you look at the back wall, you can count the fact that there's actually 9 blocks in that wall. And the spawning is done by where the location of the mob's feet are. So we actually have 3 blocks going up for generation, which is why you'll actually find a dungeon with 4 blocks of air as far as its ceiling. So our first level will be the floor level, where the feet will generate. So here's the floor level. That is the first area. Nothing will generate below this spawner. So our first one is right here. Right, so the feet are at the bottom, and it's still within this range. And he's going to go up there, which is fine. The second possible spawning level is right here. And you notice it's still within this generation box. And since I don't have to put a skeleton there, is if the skeleton spawns here, its feet are still within the spawning range of the 3rd block, but it requires an air block for its head to form, which is why you'll find 4 levels of open air in a dungeon. You guys can go down. And once again, nothing will spawn below the spawner. So the spawning range of a spawner is 9 by 9 by 3, although you do require a 4th level for air, so it should be 9 by 9 by 4. Alright, let's cover the blocks that go underneath the spawner. In the old days, the mobs used to bob up and down in the water and stuff. With 13 and 14, the mobs now sink. So we used to actually put the water chamber or whatever normal source that we use to get the mobs out of the farm so we can use 3 blocks below it. This red concrete will indicate those 3 blocks below this. So if I put a mob here, he will slowly move out towards where I'm going to drop him. Okay. The reason we do this is based upon, well, remember I showed you that the mob generation area, which is that 9 by 9 by 3 block area. You want to get their head out of this generation. So if you have a mob that's stuck here, his head is still here. Even though the feet actually count as where the mob will generate. And of course, he's going to walk off and die. Get another test guy back up. The spawner's going to see, okay, wait a minute, I still have a skeleton here. So that's going to either not allow another spawn to happen, or it's going to decrease the amount of spawns that are generated. So you want to make sure that the head gets below the floor of this spawning area. So you want to make sure your spawner is 2 will work, but if you put it by 3, you're guaranteed to make sure that that mob is outside of the sensing and generation of the mob. Let's go over the farm creation now. I'm going to come into the dungeon and I'm going to actually dig out a 9 by 9 by 7 block of air. Alright, and that will allow the formation of the mob, in this case skeletons as you saw there. Even though I have all this open light source here, there's enough dark area for this spawner to still function. Now what I like to do is I like to be able to turn the farm off when I want to, if in case I need to do some work or I don't want the mobs to spawn and stuff like that. So I set up a redstone lighting system that'll light the entire spawning area up that guarantees to shut down all possible spawning from the spawner. Now as you can see, he's going faster, which means he's getting ready to spawn something. But it can't find a dark area to spawn a skeleton in. And how this works is, on the floor level, equal with the spawner itself, I place a lamp on each of the 4 walls. To stop spawns from spawning on top of the spawner or falling on top of the spawner, we put blocks up here that prevent it. And I also use that as a redstone, and I use 2 here because the second one is blood powered by the first one. And in the ceiling, come into the corner, you come 1 block diagonal out, and you place in a lamp on each one of the corners. And this guarantees that that whole entire spawning area has a level 8 or better light source to prevent any and all spawning from the spawner. Let's cover some of the lighting basics. In front of us are light sources that we use within the game. The most common being, of course, the torch. And then we have glowstone, the jack-o'-lantern, sea lantern, fire, and now with the campfire, the lantern. Believe it or not, a brown mushroom will give off a very small amount of light, not that you use it for anything. The end rod, and only in water, the sea pickle, and that will be dependent upon how many you place, between 1 to 4. And last but not least, of course, the redstone lamp. When you place a torch down on the ground, you get 6 blocks out from the light source that are all level 8 and above. And then it forms this diamond formation around the light source that's all lightable. Anything that's in this grass range is either a 7 or below and will spawn hostile mobs. How lighting will work going up and down is for every one you go up, you generate 2 less. So we can go up 3 blocks, 1, 2, 3, and still be okay on any possible spawning around this light source. But we go up 1 more, we actually reach a spawn point. And it's the same count going downwards. So up here, we have our torch, and we go down 3, 1, 2, and 3. We're good, but this one, that's it. We got hostile mobs forming. We can place a block in the ground, like glowstone, a lamp, or a pumpkin, or whatever. It gives us the same count as placing a torch on top of the block. So we get 6 blocks out in our diamond formation by placing it in the ground. If we place it on top of the block, like we would on a torch, we actually get 7 blocks out in our diamond formation. All right. Now, if we place, say, the redstone lamp in the wall, we get our 7 blocks coming out, and we get our diamond formation going this way. And what happens is, going up, we get this little weird kind of shape, believe it or not. All these red blocks, if I was standing on these blocks, okay, I'm actually now spawning hostile mobs. To give you an idea of the coverage of what that would look like, here is a roofed area showing this. Okay, and then that's from the bottom. Now, if we did it from the top, it's the same thing. This all represents non-spawnable. Anything below these blocks will spawn something in. So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks below this light source. Let's cover some of the redstone basics here. Redstone dust gives us our redstone wiring that allows us to create our machines. And we use redstone torches as a power source, which will give us actually 15 levels of power. What that basically means is from the power source, in this case the torch, we can go 15 blocks out for any item that needs to be powered. So we can go 5, 10, 15 blocks, and the 15 blocks is still powered, but if you actually look down the line, you can see that it gets duller and duller until it reaches the 16th block, which is now not powered at all. So you get no particles, there's no any kind of color change or anything like that. Alright. We have additional power sources though besides the torch. You have the lever, which will generate 15 levels of power when it's either turned on. Turn it off, it deactivates all of the power line. You have the redstone block, which is just like the torch, is a continuous power source. You can't turn it on or turn it off. That gives you 15 levels of power. You have the button, which will generate 15 levels of power based upon the duration for which the button is activated for. And then it deactivates the entire line. The pressure plate works in the same way, but its activation is only as long as whatever is pressing the plate will keep the power generated. But it's also 15 levels. Your daylight sensor is a little bit different. Its power generation signal is based upon the location of the sun or the moon, because it can be either day or night. And the location of the sun or the moon will dictate the level up to 15. And that's why you saw the lamp was not on before, but it is now because we're about midday. We're getting to be about midday. And when the sun starts going past midday, the signal strength will begin to decrease until it reaches 0. So that's how the daylight sensor works, and how the signal strength works as far as the daylight sensor. Alright, let's cover this little section right here, the repeater. Now, if you need a signal that has to be repeated, like in other words, you go 15, you have to go 20, you're going to use a device called the repeater. There's multiple functions for this, but this is one of the primary functions. It actually takes a signal strength and repeats it at a full strength of 15. So as you can see here is the torch. We're powering that redstone. We're powering that redstone. We have an air gap here, which technically is being powered, but since there's an air gap, there's no power, so that dust doesn't get powered. Now, we put a repeater here. We go 15 blocks out. 5, 10, 15, and block 16 is off. And if you look here, you can see that we've actually gone past the original, just simple redstone torch. That's how that function of the repeater works. And let's go over the bud powering and air gap. Now here we have our redstone torch, which is powering these 3 sources of redstone. As it comes over here and gets into this air gap, which is a transparent block, it's not going to power anything. So this lamp is not going to activate. That dust is not going to activate. But since this wire is going into this block, it's bud powering this redstone lamp. But it will not carry through the block, which is why that redstone dust is not powered. Same thing with this piston. So if we take that block out, the piston will deactivate. We put the block back in, it activates. That's called bud powering. To show the transparency and why it doesn't work, we'll come over here. This redstone dust goes into this leaf block, which is a transparent block. So therefore it won't bud power, but as we did with there, we have a solid block. We're bud powering that lamp. All right, let's go over here real quick. Now, you can take a source and actually go 15 blocks out in all 4 directions. So as you can see, each one of these lines is powered out to 15 blocks. And it doesn't have to be a straight line. It can be, squiggly or zigzag, bending around, whatever it is you need it to do. Just remember, if you need it to go further or go through a block, you have to use a repeater. Let's cover the redstone lighting mechanism for the farm. This is just the basics behind what I'm actually going to eventually design. I'm going to use a lever to power the first block, which is this one that powers our first lamp right here. This block will then send out a signal to the right and to the left that will power this redstone lamp and this redstone lamp. Alright, then of course, now the question becomes, how do we power the lamps in the ceiling, the back wall, and in the center here? So I'm going to take one of these sides and use a repeater to pull out the signal strength that's in this block here and repeat it by 15. So we can come here and around to the back, bud power the back lamp, and start setting up a redstone torch tower that will power a line of redstone that's in this H formation that bud powers these 4 lamps on top, powers the top lamp, and bud powers the lamp that's underneath it. That gives us our lighting system for the farm. Let's quickly go over how to kill the mobs, or at least one way of killing the mobs. This is going to cover the method for instant death. Now, to instantly kill a mob out of a farm, you have to drop them. Essentially, it's the quickest way to get to kill them. So if we put up a mob 23 blocks above the ground and drop them, you notice they don't actually die. They're still there. They've actually taken enough damage that if you hit them, by punching them, you will kill them. All right. So if we drop them 23.5 blocks, they die instantly, each and every single time. Like so. So when you're setting up a drop instant kill, make sure that they fall 23.5 blocks minimum to get the instant kill. Now, of course, you have to remember that's without armor. Armor will, of course, change the how far they'd have to drop in order to be instant kill. And here we are with the dungeon pretty much all built up. Okay, so pretty much everything I talked about in the testing world has been done here. The only thing that I've added since then, is, of course, is my kill area. I'm going to use my dogs to kill the skeletons for me because them killing them gets me my experience points, and I don't have to do anything. I can just stand here, collect the experience points. Hopefully the dogs just don't die due to thorns. So, let's go over what we got here so far. We have our 9x9x7 chamber right here. Alright, I have my row of water sources right here. Remember that a water source will produce 8 blocks worth of water flow. So in order to get this entire floor covered, you have to have a water source on each of the 9 blocks on one section. Alright. Okay, good. And then what I did for the circuitry, because I'm going to use a water elevator to bring the skeletons up to a certain point, and then I'm going to drop them for my experience. I have, for now, until I change it later on, the levers here, which powers the lamp, and will power this line of redstone that goes underneath it, brings it around and up to the second lamp, and it brings it around the back, using the repeater trick, right there, and my torch tower going right here. The difference between this one is there's only 2 torches here. Get up top. Coming up. And then on this block, I have actually got the redstone dust into the H formation with my lamps up on top. Okay, that's the lighting mechanism, the killing area. And now let's talk about how we're going to get them up in the air. And there's a reason why I'm also bringing it there, because that's going to be another project down the road. So what I want to do is, when you come out here, water will only flow the 8 blocks. This is a 9-block wall section, which is good because we actually want to drop them into this trough area so that they can be funneled further down into the water elevator. So they'll come down here. I'm going to have these 2 blocks here, put a water source here, which will flow down and come down here. And they can't get back up because there'll be 2 blocks here. And besides, if they try to jump back up here, the water will push them back anyway. So we don't have to worry about that. And then they're going to come down here. And on the 9th block, or in this one corner where you're funneling them into, you're going to dig down and drop in fencing right here. So it's actually like a block below, but it's like standing on a half slab. And then what's going to happen is that dirt block that's right there is actually going to be soul sand. That's going to create the water elevator going up, which is why I have these 2 fence gates here to trap the water so it doesn't backflow and mess the system up. And there's actually an air gap right here. See this block right here is an air gap. As the water comes down, it'll come down and pull in this direction to help with pulling the mobs over the soul sand. And by dropping them down here a little bit, they'll come under this second block here because it's too tall. And as the water will come flowing in, they'll get here. There'll be a little bit of a grab here, and that should push them the rest of the way. And if not, there'll be another skeleton that comes in and will eventually push them in, or they will move themselves into the elevator and go all the way up until we drop them down. So let's see how this is going to look. We're going to drop a water source right here. That's going to come in and go over these fence, and then of course push us back up on top of the soul sand. And that's how that's going to work. Alright, so let me get the water sources all in here. Remember, if you're building a water elevator, every one of these blocks, there has to be a water source. So let me get that going, and then we'll actually see this thing in operation. Everything is now in place. While the spawn art may not look pretty, it's all functional. Alright, so let's see this thing work. Let's turn it on. Get down here. Skeletons have already spawned. I left a little hole here so you can actually watch them go into the chute. You can hear them. There they go. He's going to try to shoot me. Ow. And look at that. Right up into the water elevator chute he goes. And let's get back over here. He's going to come down and he's going to fall. Give it a second. There it is. And of course my doggies will see him and kill him. Alright, so let's get up top real quick and I'll explain the bridge over and we're done. Alright everybody, here we are at the top of the bridge. The water elevator chute coming up is right here. As you can see, the bubbles that are generated from the soul sand. And since I have the up and down chutes 8 blocks apart from each other, at least water source wise, I do not actually have to put a sign or a fence gate here to prevent the water from overflowing. Normally you would have to do that, but from the water source, which is right here, all the way over is 8 blocks. So the skeleton's going to come up, come into this 1x2 chamber, and be pushed all along here and fall down to where the dogs are going to kill them. And that's the end of it. I mean, that's as simple as it is, guys. Alright? So we are done with this part of the project. The skeleton spawner is up and running. I'm going to get my XP. I'm going to get my arrows. I'm going to get my bones. And I'll get the bows because I want to use those for, of course, some redstone projects coming up in the future. So as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Y'all take care now. Bye.